Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. And in this video, I'd like to discuss how, in the midst of a cost of living crisis and knowing that it would harm economic growth, the Tories allowed British Gas to increase their profits by well over 900% in the space of 1 year. 900%. Are you kidding me? But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So lots of takes on the announcement of the recession today. Lots you could talk about as contributing, but it really comes down to this. The Tories made a conscious decision to use their powers in government to asset strip the nation. Our economy has been doing particularly badly since Rishi Sunak was put in charge of it, first as Chancellor, then as Prime Minister. But our economy has struggled against the actions of the Tories since they came to office. But this news about British Gas just tells it all in one nice, neatly packaged example. A couple of years ago, our energy bills were increasing. They ended up doubling for domestic energy and much more for business rates. Now, let's break down the immediate impact of this. For domestic users, of course, it means that struggling households then cannot afford their normal expenses. So some things have to fall by the wayside. That means local businesses getting less business, which harms the local economy. And when this happens all over the country, it means a hit to the national economy. So if it turned out that the government allowed energy prices to go up needlessly, then they were allowing our economy to fail for the sake of corporate profits. But then consider the impact on business users. Farmers who couldn't afford to sell produce with the extra cost of energy because they're locked into to selling prices to supermarkets. So we had to import more food, hitting our balance of trade. Restaurants and pubs that closed down, citing the unaffordable cost of energy. That hit the economy as well. Basically, it's undeniable that the rising cost of energy harmed our productivity, to say nothing of quality of life for people on low to middling incomes. So the important question is, were the energy price increases necessary? Was there really anything the government could do? People believed they were necessary due to the disruption in supply chains caused by Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, even though, as the government kept saying at the time, we bought very little oil or gas from Russia. But people pointed out that oil and gas companies were making windfall profits from this. If the government taxed the windfall profits, they could have compensated the energy companies for the increase in wholesale gas and oil and maintain energy prices at maybe a few percent increase, not 100%. But they didn't. And here's the thing. The profits report today proves that the energy price increases weren't necessary, certainly not last year. I mean, the wholesale cost of gas dropped down to pre-invasion levels a long time ago. So we knew that supply chains had reordered themselves. But when we see that British Gas goes from a profit of 72 million to one of 751 million last year, just in the space of a year, we know there could not have been any justification for the high cost of energy last year. If British Gas, as an isolated example, needed to put up prices in order to manage with higher costs of production, we would expect them to have maintained their profits at roughly the same level. In fact, might have been a bit lower because we know that many people have reduced consumption in order to manage the cost of living. Those profits would certainly not have increased by over 940%. That is naked profiteering. And I know some will say, oh yeah, but yeah, it's the big companies, Phil, it's the big companies. The increase in energy prices was to protect the smaller providers, to which I've got two things to say. First, if your precious privatised energy market needs to squeeze ordinary household budgets like this just to create an illusion of working, then this model of privatised energy is not in actual fact working. Replace it. Second, if you are committed to maintaining this illusion of competition in the market, which doesn't actually exist, then the government should have taxed the windfall profits of the bigger companies and used it to compensate, not the smaller companies, those on lower incomes as a permanent energy allowance, not a one-off because they were looking a bit dicey in the polls, a permanent energy allowance until the market reset itself. There's absolutely no justification in allowing an organisation like British Gas to increase its profits by 940% in a year when it has not increased its production by anywhere near 940%. In fact, its production may well be lower. It is profiteering, and profiteering at a time when people cannot cope with the cost of living. It's immoral, but it's also self-defeating. It's self-defeating even for those on comfortable incomes because it's harming economic growth. As a result, Jeremy Hunt is now considering even more savage austerity, cuts to public services in order to pay for his pre-election bribe tax cuts. The consequence of that will be an even bleaker outlook for the UK economy over the next generation. It's self-defeating for British businesses because without money moving around the economy, too few will be able to thrive. Allowing corporate profiteering on this scale stops money moving around your economy. Like very little of these excess profits will be pumped back into our economy. Quite a lot of it may not even remain in the country. But it's also self-defeating for the Tories. It's been pointed out, the recession today is, that's based on one way of measuring it. Did your GDP, a recession is when your GDP for 2 quarters in a row shrinks. But that's just one way of measuring recession. If you focus on not so much GDP, but GDP per capita, then we've been in recession for, well over a year. And governments probably should pay more attention to GDP per capita, even if they would like not to, because it's what people feel. People don't feel the size of the overall economy. They feel their share of the wealth generated. There are countries which are much smaller GDP than we have, but the people feel better off because GDP per capita is higher. GDP per capita has now failed to grow for 7 quarters in a row. That is apparently the longest on record, according to Bloomberg's Alex Wickham. And this is what people are feeling. The economy basically didn't grow at all across 2023. The official figure, I think, is going to end up being growth of 0.1%, but that's a rounding issue. If you compare the size of the economy at the start and the end of 2023, it's the same. But the population increased. GDP per capita fell by 0.7% over 2023. Now, people do feel that. They feel it in smaller incomes in real terms. They feel it in the decisions as to what needs chopping from the household budget this month. And this is what the Tories fundamentally either fail to understand or just don't care. Because maybe they feel that as long as they maintain real terms parity or increases on pensions, they think they're fine because their most important voters they tend to be retired people who own their own homes outright. So keep inflation down. That's the key. Keep inflation down and they're fine. But the Tories can't rely just on those voters alone. And those particular voters may not punish the Tories for economic outcomes, but they're unlikely to be impressed with their health and social care outcomes. But it is the absolute definition of stupidity. Allowing this level of rampant corporate greed is harming everything. Like, what do the Tories gain from it? It's pure ideology. They don't gain from this. It's harming the economy. It's harming our public services. It's harming the living standards of ordinary people. But it's also harming the Tories politically. Harming others and harming themselves at the same time. That is the definition of stupidity. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.